Welcome to Tea with TPS. Today, we have a very distinguished guest, a man with many talents. He was a professor of English at the Pondicherry University, but now he is a poet, artist, painter, sculptor, and author. Very many talents in one person. He lives in Trivandrum, but he is recognized all over the world in different capacities. He has done research and training in different universities of the world and also won awards for poetry, lifetime achievement from the Guild of Indian English Writers. He has several anthologies of English poetry, and I myself had the privilege of releasing one of his books called The Silver Fish in 2016 in Trivandrum. More than anything else, he's a neighbor whom I see at least almost every day while we go walking, but we don't talk to each other because of COVID. So here we have this opportunity to talk to him without those limitations. Welcome, Dr. Murali Sivaramakrishnan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, these days, all conversations have to start with COVID. Nothing else has dominated our lives in the last 1 year. It's almost 1 year since we heard about it. So all of us have changed in one way or the other. But we are not very conscious of it because this change is gradual, slow. We are adjusting ourselves to the situation by inventing, innovating, adjusting, compromising. All these things are happening. So if you look back at it and see what this has done to you and your various activities, that will be a fascinating thing to talk about. So what would you say is the biggest change that COVID has brought in you? Of course, you mercifully, all of us have not been affected by it directly. But what has happened to the world and the change has affected every one of us. So how would you assess that, Murali?
So first of all, I should actually formally thank you for inviting me to this talk, and you were very generous with your words when you were describing me. I was so taken aback that I was trying to find a comfortable position to sit back. COVID has certainly affected, emotionally and intellectually, creatively, psychologically. Certainly it has affected everybody. And these days, people speak a great deal about being affected by COVID than anything else. Even international relations and everything, you ultimately start talking about, your own situations and then eventually move forward. As a poet and as a painter, I wanted to spend a lot of time, devote myself a great deal more when I left the university, voluntarily. In fact, that was my reason for leaving my professorship and chairman of the Department of English in Pondicherry University. I thought I'll get more time to sit and devote to painting and poetry. So in many ways, it was a kind of self-imposed exile. I chose to be away from the mainstream activities. So COVID actually did not surprise me in any way. But then one thing I should specifically mention, even as a creative writer and as a painter, self-imposed sort of isolation is wonderful and welcome. But when this is imposed from the outside, when you are forced to remain there, you don't have a choice, then you get disturbed. That sort of thing, you like to resist, you like to go beyond it. And that is something which, as a creative writer and as a visualizer, I have always felt. Probably this is what most people would feel when they tell you don't go out. It's like children being curtailed from going outside and playing. They feel all the more interested in going out. That is something which has that is the kind of self-imposition and the forceful imposition of staying indoors that COVID situation, this pandemic has brought in.
Well, when I came to Trivandrum, many people asked me, having lived in such glamorous capitals all around the world, flying around, etc. What are you going to do in Trivandrum? I think I'll live in Trivandrum, but I don't have to stay there all the time. And in fact, the 14 years I have been in Trivandrum, but not off Trivandrum that much, because there are opportunities to go around the whole world. It was a perfect arrangement. Whenever you wanted to be on your own doing something, that was possible. There is no social life imposed on you, but there is enough. And so it was a good mix. And the initial stages, we thought it was even better that now we don't have visitors and we can do more.
Yes, sir.
But the feeling of being left out from what is happening in the world is a very, very disturbing thought.
That is true.
You don't matter anymore. And then came the webinars to rescue all of us.
Yeah.
And now I think we have more activities and discussions online rather than ever before. So do you find some advantages in that, objectively speaking?
Certainly, sir. Certainly, because when you want to write and when you want to be a creative visualizer, or if you want to be an artist or any sort of aesthetic activity, you need space and time to reflect and to meditate. And when you do that, you feel that you need somebody to speak to. You, as a writer, you want a reader. As a painter, you want somebody to see your works. So it is necessary for us to reach out. So this has worked in a kind of paradoxical manner. You can sit back in your study or studio wherever you want, and you can reach out beyond any kind of borders and boundaries. So
and without any constraints, the constraints that normally have.
Exactly.
Because several things you can do on one day. So, but if you're traveling, 3 days are lost in the travel. But that was the fun of it. The travel was really fun, and that is something that we all miss. Diplomacy is no fun without the ability to move around and talk to people and so on. But I suppose in a balance, when you look at these things, perhaps this is what nature has imposed on humanity, a certain kind of discipline. Like the environment has done better, the skies are cleaner. And so this kind of thing, you can always count our blessings. And that is very true. At the same time, it is very constraining in so many ways. And so we are all looking forward to 2021, hoping that things will be better. But we do not know, because there is no line drawn between 2020 and 2021.
2020, yes.
It's going to be a gradual process. And hopefully by the end of 2021, we may be going back to normal, but that will be a new normal in everything. So what do you think will happen to a writer or a painter in the new norm that is emerging? And can you visualize the contours of that life?
Well, in several ways, poetry is a reflection, looking back, and at the same time, a stepping forward and an anticipation. So we poets, we always live in the past, in the present, and the future at the same time, because otherwise you cannot write. When you struggle with words and when you struggle with ideas, you certainly have to visualize what will happen in the future. So there is no point in resisting the future. This is what is going to happen. We cannot foretell, and we cannot resist what is going to happen at the same time. But in several ways, we have always tried to visualize what will happen tomorrow. As you very rightly pointed out, sir, there is no difference between 2020 and 2021. These are all cultural divides which we have created this kind of ideational divides. We have our ideas of time and space, but then COVID or pandemic or any kind of critical situations in nature, it doesn't go by this kind of thing. So there is a continuity of today and tomorrow. But tomorrow, we always hope, as we say, hope springs eternally in the human breast. Alexander Pope has so beautifully phrased it. We always believe that tomorrow will be another day, and we will, we will rectify our whatever drawbacks we have come through, and whatever maladies we have put nature into. We will be able to reclaim ourselves and will become better tomorrow. So this hope is always there in the human mind. And writers all over the world, when you examine them, you feel that, they are struggling in the present, but there is always a dim light of some kind of hope which comes, trickling from the future. And that is something which we can look forward to. And that is something which keeps us going forward as writers and intellectuals. And even people living in the present, this is what I feel, sir.
Absolutely. But even though there is no line between 2020 and 2021, maybe by coincidence, some major changes have happened as soon as the new year was born.
Yeah.
The arrival of the vaccine, for example.
Yeah.
2020 we did not have it, and 2021 we have it. In the United States, we have a change of president that's going to change life for most people on earth.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it seems to be there is a certain amount of greater optimism in 2021. Even this news about a mutated virus, it is not as bad as it was expected, I believe. Even though it spreads faster, but the lethality is less. So
Yeah.
there is the optimism is very much there, and there is some basis for it also, one thinks. But looking back at the last 1 year, has your productivity increased or decreased in terms of paintings, sculptures, writings, etc.? If you add up the contribution you have made in 2020.
Space-wise and time-wise, when I reflect on what has happened over the last 12 months or even a little that side, we assume that, I feel that I have been able to produce a little more. Like as a painter, I feel that I have got more time to spend on sketching and in trying to visualize what I would be painting, concentrating on different medium, which I really wanted to, like acrylic and watercolors at the same time, mixed media. So these sort of experimental strategies I could develop, and then I could produce a lot. Like watercolors, for instance, I sit at my table and produce at least 2 or 3 a day, because I am kept out from the outside, because I cannot go outside. I feel that I should think about what is nature, what is on the outside, and that has given me a space for examining nature in several ways, like through watercolors and through acrylic. So yes, sir, in many ways, my productivity in terms of the number and the bounty, I have been able to produce a little more. Quality wise, perhaps I will have to see, because I am exploring, I'm struggling with new strategies and new techniques which will help me go out. And that has been the case with most artists whom I have been able to talk to, because when they are forced to sit at home, they do more work. Normally artists don't work because they are very lazy people. And when they get a chance like this, they are compelled to sit back at home and they do a lot more. So quantity-wise, I think I have been able to produce a little more.
No, that way technology has helped us. I saw your online exhibition of your paintings.
Yes.
In a sense, I think it appealed to me. I saw seeing it more intimately than I would have seen it on the wall. So I felt that I could relate to the colors and the shapes and sizes, because yours is modern art. I do not know how to enjoy it except by just absorbing the atmosphere, and that is what it's meant to be so. But then, how much can you exhibit, and how much are you able to compare with peers? These two things you might be missing, isn't it?
Yeah, it has. It works both ways, because it's like a museum without walls. Andre Melrose has very clearly phrased it. He had thought about it so many years ago. This concept of having no walls, but at the same time you have a virtual painting on the wall. That is the initial experience of looking at the virtual creation on the wall will make people go closer towards that. You yourself can move it, and with the 3D effect, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can almost see the textures and the structure of the painting and move it around. So that excitement of seeing a painting on the wall virtually has in fact enhanced the way in which a painting has been exhibited in the virtual space in the present with the help of technology. Of course, but the physical spectator, like when you have an opening, when you have people speaking about your works and you are close to them, the physicality of being close to the people, speaking, communicating, and relating with them, that is something which we really miss. That, of course, we have to live with, because this is perhaps the future of art and aesthetics, because we need to keep this physical distance, social distancing, and at the same time we need to explore the way in which painting can actually let the spectator experience greater deals of depth and analyze it themselves.
Yes, that is a positive element.
Yes,
But,
it is.
but for a person like you, is an established painter, maybe this is an opportunity. But what happens to beginners and others? Nobody is going to give them the facility of having an exhibition, a virtual exhibition. You have to show one painting to somebody, one painting to another, and that is how they grow. So, for that kind of growth of young painters or new painters, is this very helpful?
It works both ways, because it's like saying that you need to have an Android phone if you want to be part of the social networking. This thing, I think most people have access to Android phones and social networking, so that you have this Instagrams and Facebook, and now WhatsApp. I don't know the condition of WhatsApp, or Signal or Telegram, or so many ways in which young people can exhibit their work, showcase their work, and get immediate communications. You put it up at 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock, you have people from overseas who are responding to your work. So that way, that closeness and this thing through social networking has helped young people a great deal. People who are enterprising, artists generally are enterprising, and artists will always find ways in which the social networking systems will help them, and that has in several ways I feel has helped younger people. We have not marginalized the young people. It's like saying the benefits of technology. I think it is reaching the people in a larger scale. Maybe that is one way of looking at it too.
I don't know whether you do any marketing of your paintings. How about that? What about that? What about that? Is it still possible?
Yes, sir. There is still, in fact, marketing the painting over the last decade has, purely been through the, internet and other web facilities. You have so many markets where you put up you digitize your painting and put up an image, because you have several ways of looking at the image. You put it up and then you have print out, and then there are buyers from overseas or wherever it is who have access to these things. They surf the net, they find the kind of paintings that they want, and they ask you. All you have to do is to, if it is a canvas, you roll it up. If it is watercolor, you frame it neatly and then you send it. So business is still there that way.
I see. And has it increased? The business has increased or decreased in the last 1 year?
Almost the same, depending on. I don't know, sir. I'm not very sure about the statistics of whether it has increased. It might, because a lot of people, buyers, prospective, art lovers, are forced to stay back at home, and they'll be surfing the net. And there are so many sites which actually make ready-made paintings available. So they will be accessing that, and that way the artists are benefiting. You don't have to go to the US, you don't have to go to Europe or anywhere in the world. You can market your painting sitting back at home through the help of social media.
But is there a culture of investing in paintings in India, except by very few people? Is there a general atmosphere of investment in paintings? Because you have to actually buy a painting of a person who is not famous. You have to find out how famous he would be in the future. Then only you can make money in paintings. So
that has been the case long ago, even from the 1960s, when progressive artists like Hussein and others, they try to exhibit in Bombay and Calcutta and major cities. They all were trying to find prospective buyers through museums. So there were curators and museums which were ready to put up even lesser known painters, lesser known works, so that people, investors are always interested in finding experimental art. So I always felt that, there was a market for lesser known painters, people who sell most are there, but people who don't sell much are identified by, and because of their talents, by a lot of these curators and showcased and promoted. That has been there right from the early times when modern art, or what is called, new wave in different isms came out in India. Right from the 60s and 70s, when we were growing up, we have always felt market for lesser known painters. Of course, there are certain people who know how to market, but then big binales and other things, which were a lot of, we could never imagine that in Cochin, in smaller places like in Kerala, Bombay and Calcutta and Delhi, but in Cochin and in Calicut, there are a lot of people who are able to, get promoted, even lesser known artists. We had, radical painters in Kerala. in the 80s. People who believed that all this so-called the upper class sort of paintings were meaningless, and they wanted to showcase the struggle, resistance activities, politically motivated sort of painters. Even their paintings, for that matter, was sold like anything because we had insightful curators who knew how to market these things. Lesser known painters, their signature just does not matter, but they made great art. And once it started to be exhibited and found its space in the on the walls, they made it.
Anyway, since we are talking about generations, old age, and young people, etc., has the pandemic brought about some change in your philosophy about your own life, a sense of intimation of mortality? Do you feel like that? Particularly because people say after 65 you should not go out. I would never have thought of myself as old at the age of 65, but
Sure.
now I'm told again and again. So has it become a more conscious reality that one is in the evening of your life? Have you started feeling like that?
Sir, as a poet and as a painter, I have always struggled with this sense of mortality, of the running away of time, temporality, and the evanescence of everything. So it has always been there. If you don't mind, I'll read a very short poem of mine, which appeared in my first anthology called Night Heron. This was when I was 30. So even when you are 30, whether you are 60 or 40 or 50, 30, this experience of mortality or passing, that has always been at the heart of things. Shall I read this short poem?
Sure.
Yeah. It's called Autumnal. Autumnal, because it is like the evening of your life, autumnal. I am 30. My nights are longer than my sleep. My days vanish at both ends and leave no trace. My eyes have sunken a little deeper, and when I talk to people, I often catch their eyes flurrying over my wealth of grey hair and pausing with brief sympathy. I have to strain a little more each day to keep pace with the world's reprobate way. My senses have painfully grown accustomed to the rarity of sensations that less often seep through. I have learned that decay is a nagging fact that you cannot just wish away, but like the waning of the moon and the yawning of the shadows, unfailing, ominous, obdurate. Darker looms the dark mass of stone, the lilac hill of my boyhood's dreams. Scrawnier the tamarind, the ageless wonder of my youthful space. But looking up, I see the eight-cornered sky's cerulean opulence exploding into a rapture of birdsong, and yellow leaves come sailing slow into my juvenile heart, crossing the 30 annual rings adamantine encase.
But this is too early to write this kind of a poem at the age of 30. If you look back at it now, you might wish I was 30.
Yes, because I was just
talking of being slow at the age of 30. That is the time when you are really fast. So this is the mystery of mankind anyway. Because suppose we knew, suppose we had a guarantee when we were born that you will have a kind of age limit given to you that you will survive up to this. Then the fun of life would have been gone because you are so guaranteed that you will be. But here, every moment was a challenge. And therefore, each year when you grow, you feel the comfort of having survived it. And then at the same time, feeling that you are going closer to it. So it's a mysterious way God has created not only human beings, all beings. And so these things, these thoughts will always be there. But this was a particularly decisive time because the WHO itself had a year ago reclassified age, and they said that youth will be up to the age of 60. And 60 to 80 was the middle age. And after 80 was adulthood, things like that. And so
Yeah.
everybody felt a bit comfortable. Now, so
Yes.
WHO says that if you are 65, stay home, and we don't want you to take any risk. So that must have been a kind of difference in our attitude.
Yeah.
And coming to the themes of poetry and painting at the time of the pandemic, because it has had in the past, whenever we had the plague or we had various other, almost a century ago, similar experience was there for mankind. And many immortal works have been done, like the plague, for example,
Yes.
or Guernica, for example. So such classics, masterpieces have come about. And there is the other attitude that Shakespeare, for example, he was during the period of the plague, but he didn't write a play on the plague, but references to it are scattered all over his plays. So either you can be, I mean, he had to close down the theater because of the social distancing. Maybe he didn't have that name, and he had to start writing sonnets instead, because he didn't need to go to the theater. So it affects creative writers in several ways, and you readjust yourself to that what kind of this thing. So do you think the number of poems and paintings on the COVID-19, has it increased? Have you noticed any kind of significant work coming out?
Yes, sir. It is. If you surf the net right now with this COVID creativity
Art.
and poetry in mind, certainly there's a spate of writers and artists who are producing a great deal with this specific theme. But COVID has been a pandemic because it has been media hyped in several ways. Because maybe I shouldn't be using that word, but because of social media, networking, and other things, a lot of people have heard about it. They know about it. So even before they know what this pandemic is, the fright and the anguish and the kind of anxiety comes into their minds. And many people who haven't actually experienced the whole thing have been able to see it on the news and then read about it. And then they start, imagining all kinds of things. And artists and poets have always been imaginatively, blessed. So they can actually make a kind of second person or a third person sort of experience into their own. And this sort of negative capability has made them, write a spate of poems and essays and non-fictional sort of contributions, and even anthologies for that matter. My own work has featured in 2 or 3 anthologies over the last 1 year. A lot of anthologies, a lot of editors have come forward with this specific focus of COVID and how it has affected the individuals for that matter. But I have always felt that, if there is a social evil, I mean, a political crisis or a social crisis or even a health hazard, it affects the most sensitive sort of people in several ways. Over the years, as you rightfully pointed out, Shakespeare or Goethe or Hermann Hesse or Alexander Bloch or any of these writers, they were always, Mayakovsky for that matter, they were always, writing about all these things. So there is no dearth of writing in the times of anguish and crisis and, sufferings and that kind of internalizing of pain. Poets and writers have always been, writing of these sort of things, anticipating it either or experiencing it in that way. It so happened that this pandemic is right in our midst, and we have writers who are alive who are writing about this too. But there are several writers who are still writing about butterflies and birds and beautiful things. They are not mentioning anything about this at all. Anything about death, people falling all around them, health hazards and social situations. They still are writing, concentrating on this sort of thing. Perhaps that is also one way of, writing about the anguish and the crisis in our times. So this is
So
what
poets are prophets also, in a sense.
several
Because
ways.
I have seen some work which people created without knowing that this was coming.
Right.
Dr. Ayyappa Panikar has a poem, for example. He talks about death in the neighborhood, another neighborhood there, and he takes it all very, very, what shall we say, with a sense of humor. Oh, he died, but he can now serve.
Yes.
Whatever or something. So at the end, he comes with saying, now, today he has come to my own home, and that is a final arrival. It will read as though, now you read it, it will appear as though he was anticipating this. from the past experience of human nature, human life. So people have been able to anticipate it also. Have you come across any other major work of that kind?
Plague, of course, as you rightfully mentioned, plague is something which many of us have lived through. And then you have short stories and short fiction of Kafka, for that matter. All the existentialist writers, they were Iron and the Soul by Sartre, or even Simone de Beauvoir. Many of these writers, they have all written about critical situations which they have been forced to face through. Hermann Hesse, for that matter. Hess is closer home. In fact, in the morning, I was just looking through some poems which Hesse had written, which were translated into English. And many of them actually talk about the crucial and critical times that he was living through. He was also anxious about what will happen to the future. Will this night go and will a day dawn? This sort of, imagery has always been there with them. And they tried to foretell the future. What will happen? Perhaps brotherhood will dawn. A sort of new fraternity will come out. Same is the case with many of the Russian writers, and Anna Akhmatova, for instance, or Alexander Blok, whom I mentioned, or Mayakovsky. All these writers, Mayakovsky's Cloud in Pants is basically about that, hope for the kind of union which will come tomorrow, where people will be able to hold hands with each other. Perhaps this is a situation which we have created on our own. Human beings are responsible. We have brought this sort of condition into our midst. Maybe tomorrow we will realize this and then grow to a better future. That is the kind of prophetic feeling that cinema has always tried to show. This sort of thing, experimental cinema, theater, music, they have all given directions to possible future where human beings will be a little more sympathetic, sensitive to each other, and there won't be exploitation, for that matter.
No, for writers, I think there are two responsibilities. One is chronicling the facts. Maybe
Yes.
not poets, but writers, story writers, etc. The more they write, the future generation will have a sense of what we felt at this particular time. And the other one is to capture the human emotions in such a way that may even give some comfort to the people. So can it be palliative creative writing? Or a vaccine, as they say. Is that possible?
Yes. First, it has to be a vaccine for the suffering soul, because primarily because I'm a lyric writer, I'm a mood writer, I am concerned with how things can be a salvation for myself. Immediately, I have to find some kind of solution to my burning heart. Then immediately my brother, my sister will also find a space within that. That is what many writers and artists have always done. They have found a sort of radical solution to their own situations, and through that they have been able to reach out and make a sort of magical salve for the society as well, with the kind of hope, as you very rightly put it. Hope and happiness and some sort of comfort.
Yeah, you can create a fantasy around yourself. That's also possible.
That is possible.
Have you written anything relating to this in the last 1 year? You have something to read?
I have. I have also written some. There are two short poems which I thought, talk about the difficulties of finding a space in this very difficult times. One is called Annual Rings. This relates to the annual rings of trees, and it is trying to relate the annual rings to the wings of birds which fly about with the freedom. Annual rings. As wings to birds are annual rings to trees and to us. It gets lighter, the core, as our memories cease to be just memories and begin to spread into season of sun and light. All exploration ceased, all tentative moves ended. The larger our space extends, the lighter our inner selves. Trees and birds and us, all one. Our flight, as days flit by, is defined in marked territories of loneliness. Like birds, we scatter with light. As trees, we extend deeper into Earth's core. Our annual rings spread way beyond any calendar and casual time. It's our history's sacred spread, our wingspan way out of time. All we can explore is that which is not us, and that is what keeps us afloat. Like old timber in the river of dreams, our annual rings are feathery light to the touch to keep us in flight. Tree like we grow, bird like in flight, as wings to birds are annual rings to trees and to us.
Well, your love for nature also comes out very clearly in this.
Yes.
By comparing yourself to the trees and the birds
To the
and
trees
so on.
and the
You are
birds.
also
Yes.
a bird watcher and naturalist. I did not mention that, and that's coming out. And which is the second one?
The second one is called the slant of sunlight. Sir, is there an echo in what I am reading?
No,
No, okay.
I don't.
The
I
slant,
don't.
okay, the slant of sunlight. The day picks its way in soft toes, sparing the dried leaves floating around the yard. The sun too does not stray too far from this end of the sky. My eye can travel only this far, like the faint summer slip of moon, a delicate trace on that western sky. Under each grain of sand, under each sliver of grass, last night's rain has hid fragments of opulence. Can I invert this light beam and reach the farthest star? Little said, the rain whispers, there is so much distance between me and you.
Very good. Well, it's very, what shall we say, very autobiographical in the sense that you're talking of your own response to it. Anyway, at this point, we would like to show some of your paintings on the screen, which we will do.
Yes.
So, as we do that, can you tell us something about your paintings? If you know which paintings you are going to show, maybe you can speak about it. So, a few minutes on the paintings that we are going to see. Can you?
Yeah. There are several categories of paintings. As a painter, I have explored. I have been primarily, I have tried to make lots of sketches. A painter needs to be a person who carries a pencil, a pen, and a notebook at the same time. And one carries one's notebooks like this. One has to have this sort of, paper. So the entire sort of things. You need your sketchbooks. Lots of painters in this of art. You need to sketch, you need to do a little bit of watercoloring, and then explore, and then put up your work on larger opaque sort of, oil or acrylic or whatever. So I can show you some of these paintings right away. Shall I? Maybe I should share.
Are you able to do? Otherwise, we will include it. We will include it in the edited program.
Maybe it's in the edited program. Okay. I tried to put it up. It is there, lots of painting. One feels that, one has to maturity.
How do you describe what kind of school, what kind of system, what kind of stage? Did you start with portraits and so on like other people do, and then moved on to abstract? Then you moved on to abstract. Now you don't do any of those. Now you don't do any of that.
No, I do that. Even now I do that. I just do, you mean figurative sort of work, like still life or portrait paintings.
Ravi Verma kind of paintings.
Ravi Verma sort of realist sort of paintings. All those things. I mean, these are all schools of paintings, and one has to pass through that. If one needs to be trained systematically as an artist, one has to go through one should know how to, like Paul Klee said, you're taking a line out for a walk. So when you're taking a dog out for a walk, so you should know how to keep your line intact, and you should know where your space ends, how to move it forward. So all those things are part of a painter's, training. This is what I feel.
But the exhibition I saw, the online exhibition I saw, it was entirely abstract.
That was there because
image.
No, but one feels that, one has a whole set of paintings which go together. An exhibition is a time when it's like a poet, bringing out an anthology. All the poems that you write, you may not put into the anthology. You need to have certain, divisions, subject matter, thematic kind of connections. So you feel that, these paintings go together. They have a statement to make. They have a kind of explorative nature. They have
But
a thematic content.
do you
And
also
formal.
have you had also these periods, the blue period and the green period? Picasso
Yes.
is talking. Those stages you have reached, you have gone through?
No, Picasso has his own age. I have my own annual rings, as I'm trying to say. So it is like, I have had my interest. I have gone through, like where there was
Various isms or anything like that.
various, because when we grew up as painters, for that matter, we had a major school which came to growing up in Kerala, for that matter, in the 70s and 80s. I found there was a major stream which came from the Madras School of Painters. Madras School of Painters were actually Cholamandal sort of painters.
Right.
And yeah, so Panikkar, KCS Panikkar. Panikkar was one of the greatest, his works were the greatest which I came across. When they were setting up KCS Panikkar's paintings in Trivandrum, a couple of years after he passed away, they set up the museum here. And I had the privilege as a young boy running around, carrying these paintings and putting them up on the walls. So I can say that I touched Panikkar's paintings. And Panikkar was a kind of, a master painter for many of us. So like Egalavya, I might have even been trained under Cholamandal artists.
Not directly, but emotionally.
Yeah, not directly, emotionally, because I could see that. And Panikkar was the first person.
Did you have a guru yourself?
Yeah, I had Panikkar as a guru, of course. After that, I moved to, the sculptor Kanai Kunjaraman, for that matter. He was a teacher in the Fine Arts College when I was studying in the University College. And I used to spend a long time with a lot of artists in the College of Fine Arts. It was a time when the School of Art was changing into the College of Fine Arts. And a lot of painters came from Calcutta, from Shantiniketan, from Baroda, from Bengal School, from Chennai. And when they all, Professor Sandanaraj and others, when they came there and they were showing us how this kind of, realistic painting was slowly giving way to new kind of modernism in art, for that matter. Several isms, symbolism, cubism, all these kind of isms which came about. They were showing us all these things, and we actually internalized that. And whether we liked it or not, the impact came from the Western Bombay School, from JJ School of Art, from the Delhi School, from Rajasthani painters, from Eastern, from Bengal. All these influences were there in our mind. So we too pass through these purple and blue and green and other things internally. Everybody has to pass through, and I too have had this kind of thing. When I look at my old paintings and I spend time in my studio, I find that, there have been phases where I have gone through. What made me move away from that and come to this? And abstract paintings were the sort of paintings that I was so moved by. I thought maybe that is my forte. So I came into that. I wouldn't say that I'll stick to abstract. Maybe I will also move to figurative paintings, just like anybody else in the present. Or then move to surrealism or some other movement. No painter is static. If you are continually exploring yourself, you will be moving from phase to phase. There are several people you are afraid of, they'll start painting in one direction and they will continue to do that. Tantric painters, they will do only tantric painter because that is their identity. They don't move, I say. But my professors, my teachers, my gurus, they always used to tell me, every day is not Friday. So have to work. Today you will do realistic kind of thing. Tomorrow you will be working out there in the sun and doing a bit of sculpture. You will be gardening, and then you will be making installations. And then at the same time, you can also go back to your studio and paint very conventional studio sort of paintings. So there is no need for us to be strictly following a particular school. In the present, there is a medley of isms which you can choose. Any painter who comes into the present can choose anything, whatever they want, because we have access to everything and all kinds of people. In Germany, for instance, the place where the Bauhaus movement in architecture originated. I was just wandering about as a painter, so I wanted to see a kind of an exhibition, and they said there is an expo going on. You can go. So I walked all the way to that place, and then I went into a hall. And believe me, I was so taken aback because I found that there is nothing on the walls. I'm used to seeing paintings on the wall, very beautifully crafted with lighting and all. And a couple of fellows, ragamuffin sort of people, were lying in a corner and smoking and drinking beer. So I politely walked over to them, frightened that they will consider me as a Auslander in Germany and will throw me out. They'll beat me up. But then I was towering enough, so I just walked to them and asked them, "Where are the paintings?" One fellow looked at me, and perhaps he knew a little bit of English, and he said, "Paintings, you're standing on them, man." He said. And the whole floor was actually, full of paintings. We think this is a mat, and we are walking on it. So there is no reason why we should have, a museum where you have these beautiful framed paintings. Paintings can be up above, and paintings can be like in Ajanta Ellora caves. You can, if you have the light, you can see it. If you don't have the light, you don't get to see it at all. You can step on it, you can roll over it, or you can do whatever you want. So all these experiments are going on in the prison. And you have installations like anything. People don't paint anymore. They'll put up, all the already available objects which they put on the wall or exhibit it and give it a beautiful lighting. Then it becomes an art object.
Broken sanitary ware.
Broken sanitary ware, yes. Just like the fountain that you're mentioning.
That's right.
Yes. Yes.
For the untrained mind, this is all very strange, but then it has its own pattern, etc.
Need not be, sir. It's like mathematics, We don't actually talk about calculus and trigonometry. We are talking only about arithmetic in the marketplace. But there is this higher levels of, mathematics for which, people spend their whole life, going after that.
No, so, but rationalization, like what I write, or political thinking, or globalization, etc. There's a lot of rationalization, and you have to justify it. You cannot just write anything, and create something which we think is the world. But each time you are answerable to what you are saying. Every word you write, you have to explain. That's the difference between artists and political commentators, etc. Anyway, we are running out of time, so let us go back to a subject in which both of us are equally interested, which is education. I remember very much that you were very helpful during my time as the Vice Chairman of the Higher Education Council, particularly the famous controversial Global Education Meet. So what I saw at that time was your ideas about liberalizing education and modernizing it matched very much with my idea. And that is why you were able to help me out with a lot of writing on that. So, but what has been your evolution since then? This is about 5 years now. And now we have the new education policy also there. Are you focusing on that, or you have left education behind?
Once a professor, always a professor, sir. So one cannot escape it. As you very rightly said, one has to rationalize and one has to intellectualize. But as an artist, I prefer to have the right side of my brain working, rationality. But as a thinker and as a professor, I would like my left side of the brain, thinking in a rational and radical way. As you rightly said, one has to rationalize. So when I try to rationalize on education, I keep myself not up to that present, but then I try to be contemporary. I try to be living in the present. And the national education policy, which you were mentioning, I don't think there is much difference between what has been practiced earlier. Perhaps more focus has been given on vocational training, which is actually something which I am worried about, because privatization of education, fine. But then making it commonplace and in a marketing it, or making the market values come into it, and making a kind of vocational system for education actually is something which I am quite worried about, because I have tried to theorize in whatever I have been writing over the last 30-40 years. I taught for many times and I still continue to teach. So I am worried about the sort of the distinctions that people don't seem to make about information, knowledge, and wisdom. People seem to be concentrating more on mere information. Academics and intellectuals and thinkers of education in the present, I'm afraid, they don't seem to see the distinction that we have made between information, knowledge, and wisdom, in their interest in marketing it. So that is something which has actually, we pride ourselves in the fact that we are living in the information age. But information for me is something like, details of flights and a menu in a hotel or something like that. You don't need to internalize it. You don't need to mug it up. You don't need to know everything about it. You can, at the press of a button, you can get this information. Now you have a lot of, ways in which the web has given you access to information for that matter. But when you move from that, you need to have a different perspective, a clear-cut perspective, which will actually make you better, knowledgeable sort of people. You need to create knowledge out of information. That is something for schooling and college education should concentrate on. The UGC, the earlier UGC, which Jawaharlal Nehru and others had created, they had visualized this sort of three-tier system. Somewhere along the way, we seem to have forgotten it. School education is something which gives you information. But when you come to the graduation or post-graduation, you are getting a little bit of knowledge, which that gives you a kind of perspective how to clear up whatever information you have gathered before that time. And there, you have IITs and other centers. They had thought about IITs at that level, because they are, centers of learning which actually applies knowledge. So knowledge in its applied sort of thing. That is what IITs are for. But if you go a little beyond that, you have our higher educational university systems where research is the order of the day. And research requires a clear-cut perspective towards wisdom. You cannot inhibit, research. You cannot force it. You can't say that this is meant for getting a clear job. That is not there. If you are going into the higher education, you have to go with the purpose of getting yourself clarified in sort of the higher wisdom. You should leave that doesn't mean that you should leave behind information and knowledge, but you progress on that. It is like internalizing knowledge and then moving beyond that at the higher research systems. Now we are stopping with this sort of, IITs, where IITs are humanities and
multidisciplinary.
But then they are giving it, multidisciplinary for what? Just for vocation, getting a job. Is that the end of education? Education is for training a globally noble soul. I stand with people like, Paulo Freire or J. Krishnamurti for that matter. Krishnamurti was a master of extraordinary sort of, perspicacity, clarity in terms of education. I don't know why we have left him behind. I have written several essays focusing on what JK has mentioned about education. But JK schools, I don't know. I don't want to go into the practical applicability of what he had thought about. But JK was a man with a vision who thought that, creative liberalization, creative sort of, freeing the individual mind from being cluttered by any sort of system. That is what education would hope for. Unfortunately, we are not doing that, sir. We are actually limiting it to the vocational guidance. If that happens, then we have lost sight of higher education.
No, Murali, when you make any kind of innovation in education today, you cannot isolate yourself from the rest of the world. Whether you like it or not, we are so interconnected. And you have to necessarily follow the best practices available in the world. We cannot keep on, reinventing the wheel. And that is the tendency that we have had. But we are now moving towards a situation where we have to share whatever is available. And this vocational thing is something which has proved right in several societies. Because everyone does not need to go to college. Everyone does not need to be a philosopher. And so you need a plumber, we need a wire electrician, we need those people for whom we don't train anyone. So a kind of classification at the age of 17 or 18, which is practiced in the West, and people are diverted to vocational courses. It is a kind of a beginning of that you have seen in this new education policy. That's why I welcome it. I have seen it as a practical application of some of the things that we were talking about. That liberal education, more choice for people, ability to exit and come back. And these are all very good things, which of course they are not entirely Indian or entirely original. But good practices around the world we need to adopt, because what is happening is a large number of our students go out to study, they also go out to work. So if you create a very Indian system or a very philosophical system, they will not fit into the rest of the world. So I'm not talking about simply about jobs, but being able to add to the society around. We are talking about demographic dividend, for example. But your learning, if that doesn't fit into the requirement of San Jose, it will be very difficult for you to fit into it.
Yes, sir.
That is also
Yes,
a
sir.
reality. And
Yeah.
India has to provide that intelligence, because we are going to be the youngest country in the world in the next 15 years. So
Yeah.
if we only produce people with our own vision, look at Swami Vivekananda, J. Krishnamurti and others, etc., they'll all be very good human beings. But they also have to fit into the jigsaw puzzle of the world. That is why I think we need both. And being a space scientist, I think the Dr. what's his name, the one who wrote the report, and so he had that mix of both, and that is
Yes.
why I think the new education policy will do us some good, even though I don't know how far we'll be able to implement it effectively.
Sir, I don't have any doubt about the points which you are raising and their relevance. That is certainly true. But then when you look at it from what sort of society do you want in the future? What is it that you want the world to head into? What is it that you want to hand over to your children and grandchildren? If we forget our own traditional roots and the quality of thinking that was practiced over the years, I'm not talking about tradition in terms of fundamentalism, but I'm talking about the kind of things that has happened in our country. The kind of, when you mentioned, earlier at the talk, you mentioned that a young person in the 30s, how is he getting so worried about mortality? I was thinking about Adi Shankara. He lived only briefly for 30 years. But
Swami Vivekananda.
Swami Vivekananda. But Adi Shankara has written extensively on growing old, decaying, on struggles and other things. That means that, he was concerned with all these things. We cannot neglect, we cannot actually forget the roots of our country's tradition. Not in terms of any fundamental regressive sort of thing. I'm talking about the kind of values which they had created. And then we have to go back, because look at the mess we have landed ourselves into. Think of all this sort of development, race that our countries have taken us to. The entire perception needs to be drastically altered. So, as a person who was concerned with ecology, with environment, I always felt that this anthropocentric, or the relating everything to the human-centered sort of thing, that has created all this mess. We have not taken care of the non-human world outside. We are responsible for the entire world, the entire system, because we are the dominant species. We are at the apex of the food chain. But then if we don't take care of these things, if we don't take care of our own traditional values, what kind of wisdom are we passing to the next generation? Are we just making them mercantile in that way? Are we just training them to give them some sort of place for them to work? Do this, do that. You are good as a welder, fine. You will get paid as much as a doctor. You are treating the human being, you treat the human being as a machine. That whole, Newtonian sort of, worldview, the mechanistic sort of thing, that has to be completely altered. We need to have a biocentric notion of things. We need to have values, sympathy, ethics at the core of our learning and wisdom. If we leave it aside, if you and I mean, people like you who are at the apex of our educational system, if you let go of this, who will take care of these things? They will be only creating carpenters and laborers, for that matter, people who cannot think liberally. JK and others, they did not speak without a vision. They said that the human mind is being strangled by systems of education. We need to open up the whole thing. This is what that Brazilian priest who unfrocked himself, Paulo Freire, also has spoken about. Banking systems of education, where we assume that we can put some money in the bank and it will breed money breeding money. Even Marx would not be able to visualize it. But that is not the case. We need to talk about human beings in the future. We need to have sympathetic minds, systematic sort of people who are compassionate in their heart. For that, we need to have a new system of education, not vocational training. As a thinker, I'm arguing like that.
No, but my emphasis has always been that we need all kinds of professions. And everybody does not have to be a philosopher, everybody does not have to be a musician. Everybody has a place in the society.
Yeah.
And if we don't attend to those requirements early enough, we will put square plugs in round holes or vice versa. Yes. And that is the problem with our system so far. So a kind of facility of free thinking, you can do mathematics and literature and music together. That kind of an education system we do not have. Choice is not there.
Yeah.
But everyone does not need to go through it. That is my point. At the age of 17, 18, if somebody is good only to be a bus conductor, why should he go and do BSc, MSc, PhD and then become a bus conductor? That's a more practical way of looking at life. But I think in this report, they have brought both these things together. They have brought in practicality. They have addressed the linguistic issue.
Yeah.
They have addressed the dropping out problem. Now you can drop out after 1 year and get a certificate.
Yeah, that is true. That is there.
So practically, there are several elements in this new education plan which I like. But unfortunately, in Kerala, we have developed a kind of resistance to it, saying that this is commoditization, this is commercialization, etc. So that is where I think we are going to be left behind if we do not adopt a national approach to this. And that, of course, we have to see how we evolve, because here people are saying the education policy is the death knell of education in Kerala.
No. Okay, it's true. No, but whatever it is, there are plus points, like for instance, going back to our own regional languages, giving equal status to regional language. This sort of things they are all most welcome, because you don't expect a person coming from Kerala to be conversant in the national language for that matter. And anyway, we cannot insist on a single national language for that matter. Bollywood is fine. Yeah, they can sing and dance.
The three language formula is what is preferred. And also bringing the children early into a systematic education. So there are many good points. Okay, we have run out of time, but thank you very much for joining me today for such a diverse discussion. We normally stick to somebody's speciality, but you are a person of many talents and many interests, and therefore it was fascinating. I hope our viewers will also find it useful. Thank you very much for taking your time off and having this tea with me in a virtual manner.
Yes,
but soon I think we'll be able to have tea together and have a chat.
Together. So I should also thank you so much, sir, for being so generous as to listen to me patiently, and I too had that. This is a kind of freewheeling conversation, as you would put it, because this is something which made me get a better perspective on whatever I'm trying to do.
And some cobwebs
cobwebs there to be removed. Excellent, sir. Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.